Yes, flies in the Vaseline. Sometimes it blows my mind. Welcome, everybody, to Gen X Wasteland, away from the realms of Gnosticism and Hermeticism, but still with all the cool people. So good to see everybody. And yes, as my guest and friend said, it is tax day. So it's a good day to rage against the machine and just rage against the world, which is something that Gen X knew how to do it better than anybody. So, with us, yeah, Mitch, welcome to this new podcast and glad to have you and hope we can talk some more different cool stuff.
Oh, great to be here, y'all. And anything you want, happy tax day. I have a very interesting strategy this year for paying my taxes. And next year's show, perhaps I'll be speaking to you from federal prison, where I understand they have upgraded the Wi-Fi. I'm very heartened by the whole thing. So
not, not
yeah,
unless it's Guantanamo Bay or an El Salvadorian
so
prison.
I don't think my offense has quite placed me on that trajectory. Yeah. So good to
We
see you
shall
all,
see.
and very glad to be here. And congrats not only on the launch of the new show, but of course the launch of the Occult Elvis, which is a book that I have believed in from the very first day, and I see it's going on to such wonderful success as I knew it would, and I'm very very happy for you, and I'm happy for America because your book is a needed book. It helps us understand ourselves.
Thank you very much. And you're right. I think that was the goal of Elvis. He represents America, the dark, the light. And I think if we get back to America, we can stop, or Elvis America, we can stop fragmenting and understand that this country does have an identity, right, Mitch? There is such a thing as being an American, and it's a great thing, and it's inclusive, it's spiritual, it's eclectic, it's
Yes,
everything that Elvis was.
and there was a critic, and I wish I remembered his name because it deserves speaking, but I just don't. But he made the observation that when Elvis had really perfected his stage show in the early 1970s, and for some people, maybe the apotheosis of that is the Aloha from Hawaii concert. Although I found that as a lifelong Elvis lover, I found that show maybe a little reserved, a little
Mhm.
quiet. I thought I had seen him do better shows on celluloid. But whatever the case is, he said that Elvis in the early 70s captured the gamut of the whole American songbook on stage, and there may be no other performer who quite did that. From gospel to rockabilly to rhythm and blues to the American standards and so forth. And I think that, and he said something else, and I think he said something idealistic, and I liked it. And he said, that's a sort of achievement of which every American ought to be proud because they saw everybody from every walk of life saw their music within that man and within that show. And that is true.
Well said indeed. And with us, it's always a pleasure to have Dr. Sherilyn Jones. Sherilyn, how are you today in the holy land of Montana?
God's country out here. I'm doing great. Everything's good. It's finally warmed up a little bit. I think we had our last big snow a week ago, so we're crossed fingers. But yeah, I'm doing great. Always looking forward to these conversations. Enjoyed your presentation so much, Mitch, at Astronosis. It was
Thank you.
awesome. And loved your book, Miguel. Got to finish that. I started yours, Mitch. It's really wonderful. Seeing a lot of points of
Thank you.
connection. So look
Thank
forward to
you.
talking about all things related.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
right on.
how is Practical Magic doing? It came out recently. How are things going with
Well,
that book?
it's doing well. To my surprise, I get this overwhelmingly positive response to offering signed copies to people, which I sign and send out myself. In fact, I literally am just back from the post office,
Hmm.
and I I was very pleasantly surprised that orders not only came in from all over North America, but a lot from overseas. And you all know that sending packages overseas is quite expensive. So when
Hmm.
somebody wants something, they're paying more for the shipping than they are for the item itself. And I was very touched. It said to me that there is a reading public, uh, large one, that wants physical copies, that wants a sense of personal connection with whomever wrote the thing. And I've been overwhelmed by the support. I'm not hugely popular at my local post office here in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, but who wants to? And so, drinking boatloads of books, and I'm very grateful to all these people. It's doing well on every count, but the surprise was the outpouring of support for the individual copies signed, and I was very touched. I was also very touched, I must add, and I'm sure this is the case with your book, Miguel. I know for a fact who's reading what where because people are sending me their addresses, and it's just all over the country, large towns, small towns, big cities, out west, down south, and literally, you name it, Mississippi, Manhattan, Montana, Monterey Beach. I'm just going to keep naming towns with M, Milwaukee, and I was very touched by that. We're not
Good.
so divided a country. We're really not. I hope people don't think I'm extrapolating in some sentimental way from that. I certainly don't mean to, but apropos of Elvis, apropos of reading habits in this country and the topics that unite all of us, I don't think I'm frequently enough reminded of how much we all have in common.
Well said. Yeah. And again, I agree with Sherilyn. It's a great book. Highly recommended for sure. And for everybody who's showing up, yeah, this is on my personal channel. I'm keeping it separated from Aeon Byte, but I also have it. It's also will be available on either iTunes, Spotify. So subscribe to Gen X Wasteland. It's there. It's on my Substack. So you can find it and yeah, check it out for sure. Well, why don't I wanted to start, we're sort of deciphering what it is to be our generation. Again, our message, we want to get to universal themes. We're not better or worse than anybody. We just have a unique perspective, Mitch. So what would you say is a Gen X wasteland? I have this sort of a presentation that I use and I sort of start it. And there's his book, Practical Magick. Check it out. Gen X Wasteland, it's always got to be the neon and the same colors when you go online to like stock places. It's so
Right.
stereotypical. There's always a skateboard guy when you find it.
Right, right.
But yeah, according to lore, the term came from Douglas Copeland's book, Generation X. Great book, great writer. And that sort of got us the title. And of course, the attitude. Remember the McJobs, microserfs, and the book taught us that we would be the one generation that wouldn't do as better as the past one, and that the game was rigged, and the 80s politically and financially sucked, and all that. But that's it. What do you think, Mitch, or what's your take on what it is to be a Gen Xer?
Well, I suppose ours is the last generation that grew up pre-digital. I don't know fully how that characterizes or colors us as a generation, but I can certainly remember what it meant to do research by going into an archive or a library. When I first got out of school, I worked as a newspaper reporter, and the internet really, well, it wasn't even, it was certainly in its nascency in prototype form, but it wasn't available to the general public or the everyday person. And I remember tracking things down and libraries and plowing through census records and going through graveyards of newspapers and, visiting the police stations and, going through case files. And it wasn't always so easy. And I'd like to believe I've retained some of those skills. It certainly comes in handy when you're writing historically, as I often do. And perhaps the influence of our generation, I don't know, is sustaining print literature, is sustaining vinyl. I'm very pleased to see the resurgence in vinyl records, which has been going on for several years now, not just because I'm nostalgic for vinyl, which I am, but because the lover of vinyl is also a person whose musical tastes are such that they might be a little bit outside the grid. And so artists who might have released a record years ago that was regarded as a flop suddenly find that their stuff is getting re-released in vinyl, and there is a generation waiting for it. So I feel, I suppose, lucky in a certain way to be a member of Gen X. I have a Gen X Elvis story, if I may share it
Yes,
with
please do. Of course.
you.
Yeah. Sounds
I
like
was always an Elvis fan, from out of the womb. I'm a cradle fan of Elvis, and
were you,
when I beg
did
pardon?
your parents did you get it through your parents, or was it something you just grokked?
No, it's one of these funny things. I'm sure you all both and many of the viewers have had this experience where you hear a name or you see a character, and it just turns you on. And I remember when I was a little kid, maybe about 8 or 9 years old, I had one of these kids' joke books, and it said, "What's 6 feet tall and green and sings?" Elvis Parsley, which sounds like one of my jokes. And
Dad joke.
yeah, I know, right? There was the dad joke when I was 9, and and so I said to my older sister, what is this? Because I didn't know what the joke was, and she said, "Oh, that's Elvis Presley." And I said, "Who's Elvis Presley?" And she says, "Oh, he's some guy who wears his shirt all the way open so everybody could see his chest, and says, 'Can everybody see my chest?' And then sings, 'You ain't nothing but a hound dog.'" And I was like, "Who is this?" And I grew fascinated. Anyway, by age 11, maybe 10, I was a diehard fan, and I actually had tickets to see the man himself in concert at NASA Coliseum on Long Island. And I saved up $9 from my paper route. I used to deliver a paper called Newsday, and that $9 went toward buying an Elvis ticket. And I was so excited I couldn't sleep. And he died 5 days before the concert. 5 days.
Mm.
And I cried and cried. I'll never forget it. I remember I walked in to my house one day. I guess I had just finished my paper route, and everybody was hushed and very quiet. And I said, "What's going on?" And my sister said to me, "Aunt Lois just called, and she said Elvis Presley died." And my father said, "All right, let's everyone remain calm. Let's just turn
Oh,
on the
wow.
news." So we turned on 1010 Wins, which every New Yorker knows, or every New Yorker of a certain age is the go-to source for news. They're still out there. Um, and we turned it on, and it was on a commercial break. And then when the announcer's voice came back, I'll never forget these words. He said, "Twist of hips, crown on head. The king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, died today."
Wow.
And I don't mean to over dramatize, but for me, it was like the Kennedy assassination, and it meant something. So I think a lot of Elvis fans feel that way, of different ages. You feel like it's interesting in the same way that people from certain faiths value saints or relics, something about the other world, reaching us. Elvis represented the other world reaching us, which is why I think we keep searching and searching for him.
Beautifully said. Yeah, what a story. God, I'm sure that's on your mind all the time. 5
Every day.
days. If I could have,
Everybody always asks me, did I keep the ticket? And I returned the ticket because I was a kid. I needed the $9. But my partner Jacqueline Castell, for my birthday in 2019, took me to Graceland. We stayed. You'll love this, Miguel. We stayed at Lauderdale Court, the housing project where Elvis grew up.
Get out of here.
To find out how to rent Elvis's bedroom in Lauderdale Court, and there it was.
Wow.
And she bought me, among other things, a ticket to the concert that I missed. So we have it framed here in the joint.
Wow, what an incredible story. Wow, thanks for sharing. And yes, Mitch was instrumental in helping my book, The Occult Elvis. So the king is proud of what we've done. So it's something else. And yeah, for those of you in the chat room, I will try to get to your questions. I don't know if Ray's showing up with the phone. Again, this podcast is still taking shape and all that good stuff. So Elvis was one of your influences too, but you're also very open about how punk rock was very important to you. So maybe you can share on that. And I want to share a story that some article I ran into, like what caused the destruction of modern music. And this author said he blamed it on the Ramones. And I thought, but it's in a way it makes sense because he was talking about how in the late 70s, rock music was very layered and overproduced. Think of
Yeah.
Queen, Elton John's, even
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Suddenly the Ramones come up and they're like, screw this. We're going back to, they're big Elvis fans. We're going back to the simple
Oh, yeah.
one notes,
Yeah.
easy beat. And maybe they weren't a global force, but they were hugely influential on musicians later on. And rock sort of became a minimalist kind of genre, especially in the 90s and so forth. So the Ramones sort of shrank rock away from its big theatrics and overproduced vibes, and here we are. But the Ramones are a big one on you, right?
Oh yeah, it's funny you say that because when I was a kid, it was the Ramones and Elvis that I loved. And people couldn't imagine, like, why are you into this sequin guy, you know, up on stage with his orchestra? They didn't get it. But the punks did get it. The Ramones certainly got it.
The Clash, Strummer, and those guys were Elvis Gaga fans, yeah.
Absolute just maniacs for Elvis. I mean, you look at Joe and you see Elvis, right? This was also true, by the way, of the great punk pioneer, Alan Vega. Jacqueline, my partner, is pals with Alan's widow, Liz Lemire, who is a musician in her own right. She just finished a tour out west, and we've been in their place, and he had pictures of Elvis up, including the sequined Elvis, and he loved him, you know, as I do. The sequined Elvis is the Elvis I grew up with, so that's the Elvis I love the most. And everybody, I mean, you know, from Dylan to John Lennon to Alan Vega to the Ramones to the Clash, even though he'd never admitted, Johnny Rotten. I mean, I saw Johnny several times when he was with Public Image Limited, and I was awestruck because when he would strike a pose, you know, kind of in profile and lift the microphone, you were looking at Elvis Presley. And I think that I don't know that the modern world scene, the modern world culture, would be recognizable without this man.
No, I mean, you can say Jimmy Page. There would be no Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, no David Bowie without Elvis.
Right.
It's just, yeah, he was the beginning, the big bang of this spiritual movement called rock and roll. And again, I think the punk really brought it down to its original roots: working class, the outsider, the downtrodden. Keep it simple and keep it raw.
Keep it simple, keep it raw. And it seems to me that there was an honesty about it. There was a back to basics. You know, people responded to it. And I'll never forget, you know, the first time I heard Elvis sing Hound Dog rather than my sister, you know, imitating him. And I mean, it was like the Red Sea parted, you know. I must have been about 10, maybe 10 years old. Yeah, I'm sure of it. I was 10. I bought a copy of Elvis's Gold Records Volume 1 at a garage sale. It must have been a first pressing. Of course, I didn't keep it, you know, because why should I hang on to anything valuable, you know? And, this is all green screen behind you. And
of course.
yeah, I don't have anything. And so anyway, I mean, when Needle touched vinyl on an old, you know, Victrola, portable Victrola with a handle, I mean, it was the beginning of something. And I can only imagine how many different individuals over the years have felt that way. And I want to say one other thing. You know, I never heard a single instance, and Miguel, you've researched Elvis tirelessly. Never heard a single instance of the man being rude to anybody.
No. I think there was one time. Yeah, there's one story where he grabbed some woman by the hair and threw it out of his suite, but that was during a big drug-induced party in Vegas. I think that's the one instance I can think. But yeah. Mm-hmm. But even then, he would apologize. Even when he was at the top of his game, he would apologize for any slight. Everybody was sir, ma'am, everything else. You know, and he got some bad fights with Priscilla, but they usually work things out. And after the mean things was, the most courteous. He saw everybody as equal, as his mother taught him. We're all equal under the eyes of God. All religions, cultures had something valuable. He was really a very egalitarian and fair-minded. You know, the only religion he hated was Scientology. He called it godless. That's why, because there was no God.
I see. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, I think the fans, including the legion of them who were born after his death, I think they feel that. I think they understand that. It deepens their certainty that this is somebody who visited us in a certain sense from a better world. And there is a religiosity around it. And I think rightly so.
And he still does. And so interesting about what you said about the Hound Dog. I'm working on the sequel on a David Bowie biography, and it's really freaky because it's the same thing. His cousin was playing Hound Dog, his female cousin, and he saw the look on her face and her energy. And David Bowie, at like 9 years old, was like, "This is it. This is my destiny." Hound Dog, the energy of his cousin. So the same magic got to him that got to you.
Yeah, it's interesting too to think about all of this with respect to the fluidity of time, the nonlinearity of time, something I read a lot about in Practical Magick.
Mm-hmm.
I've often wondered, I have a chapter on the book in retrocausality, whereby stuff that happens in the so-called future affects stuff that happens in the so-called present. And I suspect this whole field has been emergent in quantum mechanics since the early 1960s, this particular field. And thanks to the influence of parapsychologist Darrell Bem,
Mm-hmm.
who's a clinical psychologist at Cornell, it's been brought into the cognitive field as well. And questions of retrocausality are going to be so hot and remarkable for the rising generation. When I hear stories like that about David Bowie getting so turned on by Elvis, I wonder sometimes, did it start then, or did David kind of select that reality from where he was at a later place? Conor Habib, who's a fellow podcaster and a novelist, he published a thriller called Hawk Mountain a couple of years ago. And Conor tells a story that when he was a little kid growing up in central Pennsylvania, he dreamt of being a novelist, and he dreamt of writing thrillers and having endorsements on the front from his heroes, one of whom was the horror novelist Clive Barker. And he said it just freaks him out that he was drawing that, on his construction paper, and as an adult, boom, his novel Hawk Mountain has a quote on the front from Clive Barker.
Wow.
Did he select it then? Did he select it in the future? It's obviously real. It's obviously empirical. But at what point did Conor make that selection? Maybe he selected it the moment he told the story, just like I've told you guys the story about having those Elvis tickets. It's entirely true. I suppose if I needed to, I could probably prove it. But maybe I as a lover of Elvis in the here and now, I've selected that reality, and it is a reality. And we may be doing that every instant of time. If I was to ask Sherilyn, who are your parents? What did they do for a living? You could tell me, and you'd have the photographs and the memories, and it's as real as the words I'm now speaking. And yet it could be that you selected that reality just at this instant, and it informs everything. If you follow Einstein, if you follow Richard Feynman, if you follow Darrell Bem, it's almost a logical necessity.
Yeah, well said indeed. Yeah, and the problem too is then you have people like David Bowie and Philip K. Dick who are just unreliable witnesses, big time liars. I mean, Bowie once said, "I'm a liar, and that's the one honest thing I've said all my life." So then there's human beings are human beings. We make up shit. We do. We don't see things. We can't agree on a traffic accident, or
Absolutely.
You'll go on Twitter and a politician will say something, and you've got two sides, and I'm like, how can you guys be so opposite?
Yeah.
It's like, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, look, I've had my share of tangles with career skeptics of parapsychology, ESP, psychical research. I can't figure out their reality. They can't figure out mine. They don't care about mine. They're as convinced that ESP is resultant of lab mistakes or whatever, as they are of what they ate for breakfast. And they're wrong, and they're demonstrably wrong, but their belief is impenetrable. They're unreachable. And I don't accuse them of being liars, because I think that they may be assholes, but they're not liars. They're authentically invested in what they say, and they're just wrong, and they cannot be reached. And eventually, it won't matter very much, because I suspect, their redoubt of influence is Wikipedia, which is a hell of a redoubt of influence. But I suspect in the near future that's going to get overshadowed by AI, which I trust more, frankly, than I do a bunch of activist pseudo-skeptics who have nothing better to do than spike articles and parapsychology research on Wiki. So their day is fading, and it's fading right before our eyes. But I can accuse them of a lot of things: cynicism, foolishness, but not insincerity exactly, or not lying. I'll say not lying.
Yeah, we all hold on to these fictions. It's part of being a human.
Yes.
So, Sherilyn, what do you think? Do you have a question or remark? Tell us what's on your mind.
Mitch, when you were saying that about, well, they might be all these other things, but they're not lying. It was reminding me of the line in The Big Lebowski when he's Walter's hammering the dude, and he said, "Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Am I wrong?" And the dude's like, "No, Walter, you're just an asshole."
Right,
Exactly.
Just stop,
Right. That's perfect.
Right. I wanted to add my own Elvis story, which I've told to Miguel, and he said, "Oh my God, Mitch has the same story." So I was quite a bit younger. I was 3. And for me, it was just my parents were huge Elvis fans, and both sides. And I have an uncle who's passed now, but he's a dead. I should find a picture of him. Dead ringer for Elvis.
Oh, really?
Military, kind of the same years. Everybody was always aping Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like this. He was a figure that was. It wasn't just music. It was just part of the surround, and I think that kind of distinguishes our generation as maybe we were I'm going farther afield, but maybe we were one of the last ones that kind of lived in this kind of cultural, it was a complete surround. You had your 3 channels, your 5 radio stations, your 2 newspapers, so it was a surround, and Elvis was just part of that sort of, it's milieu isn't even a good word, just surround, that you lived in. Anyway, so I can remember I was sitting on the little seat back when you could ride in the middle of the seats in the front on the armrests, and it didn't matter.
Right.
But we were listening to Elvis, and I lived in Bradenton, Florida, and they said Elvis is coming to the Tampa Bay Convention Center. It was after my birthday, which was in September.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Oh, Mom, can we go see? Can we see it? Go see it? Will you please take me?" Oh my God! She said, "Absolutely, we're going to go see Elvis." And he died.
Oh man!
Oh wow!
That's
so I was so young that it was. I remember it, like you said, it's indelible. I'm like, no, I know we were going to that show, but I think also maybe, and this is a generational sort of observation too. Maybe we were also one of the last generations that, before oversharing, right? When parents would just hide stuff. If something bad happened, you just don't talk about it.
Right.
Elvis died. No one told me. No one. He was mythic in any event.
Right.
So he never really went away because he was always there, but that was.
Elvis went to a dog farm in Idaho, and he's very happy right now. He's very happy.
He's somewhere. So yeah, that's but yeah, that when you told that to Miguel, and he's like, "Oh my God, Mitch, is this similar?"
They did,
So.
I have a question for both of you, because both of you have relatively young kids. Do your kids know who Elvis is? Are they cognizant of him?
Oh yeah, I've been sharing it with Connell more, and he's just, as they are, kids see Elvis and they're just, they're just taken by it.
No kidding.
Something mythic about.
He is. He's a myth. He's a living myth. He's part of the American psyche. Will always be. Yes, my kids, 13? This generation, second marriage, 13, 11, and 9. There are 3 figures that they know very well that have reached this mythic status. Madonna, Michael Jackson, and Elvis. And
Mhm,
they
mhm.
know. And obviously, Elvis songs do go viral on TikTok, and Elvis dances. And same with Madonna and Michael Jackson. So, yeah, they know. They
That's very
know about
interesting.
it.
I
So,
think my boys are older. One is 18 and one is 20. I think probably the 20-year-old saw the Elvis movie, um, but whatever Dad likes, from ghosts to interdimensionality to Elvis, is immediately on the outs. So secretly they
uncool.
like him. I'm quite sure, secretly.
Yeah, it's amazing. And yeah, the one thing I have a criticism with Gen X, I was thinking the other day, it's like, and we play it down. I even tested it with my wife, is that the Elvis of our era was Madonna. And we
Mhm.
don't want to admit it, but she was ubiquitous. She
Sure.
dominated the charts. She
Yep.
dominated culture, Hollywood. She was on and I know she's gone a little strange these days in her dotage, but she was that big. And Gen X is grunge and punk. It's like, no, I mean, she was that kind of
I
mythical,
agree. I
larger than,
agree.
and we should face it, face that anima and integrate it. Get Sherilyn will like that, getting Jungian.
Yeah, yeah. This is maybe a marker of being Gen X. We went to see Madonna on her very last tour, and she was performing with her ensemble to recorded music. And for me, that was a bummer, because I remember when Madonna used to tour with a band. And there's an excitement that accompanies a live band that I believe can't really be replicated.
No.
And I love her and I'll always love her, but I was disappointed that she was playing to recorded music.
Yeah, that's a pity. And I don't think the Elvis also never left our generation because, as we've talked, Mitch, and certainly with Sherilyn, the energy of Elvis was alive and well in the 90s with individuals who were always chasing to become Elvis or represent them. David Lynch, Quentin Tarantino, Nicolas Cage, John Travolta. You look back and you're like, these guys are all trying to catch up to Elvis or honor him in their own way. So it was part of the fabric of our culture as Gen Xers.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I mean, Cage and Lynch. I don't know if there would have been a Cage and Lynch without Elvis.
No.
And I never asked David about Elvis, but I would imagine. Well, I don't know what he would have said. Quite frankly, I don't know what he would have said. I did
He
ask
did
him
say he
once.
was the greatest icon of our century.
Oh, he
He
did
was
say
very
that.
adamant.
I'm
Yeah,
glad to
very.
hear
And he
that.
said nobody touched Elvis when it came to be an icon.
I'm glad to hear that. I did say to David once, "Have you ever experienced anything paranormal, ghost, a UFO?" And he said, "No." And that was it.
No.
That was it. But he was a very spiritual person, of course, because he
Yeah.
was very deeply dedicated, as you all know, to transcendental meditation. And I think he had I know he had a very seriously felt, a very deeply felt um, sense of life continuing after physical demise, and he was very, very interested in that, and he cared very deeply about that and felt a sense of absolute verity in bodily survival.
Cool. And I guess the next question, Sherilyn, do you have a question or a remark before I go to my next question?
Well, I wanted to comment too about just this idea of us being the last pre-digital. Oh, I'll say too, I have two grown sons, and I think the Elvis thing really they never grasped that.
Is that right? Uh-huh.
I worked in live music for about 3 years and did some marketing for longer. And I think I had moved so far beyond that and was so into this sort of independent scene that, I mean, the influence is always there, right? But I think it would be, for them, it would be oblique, and as they've gotten older, they've discovered a lot of music that, predated or underpinned the things that I kind of raised them on. But they've done that independently. But I was going to say, this idea of us being the first or the last, before the digital age, I think it's given us a real appreciation for the tactile and the interpersonal, that we're not willing to give that up. I mean, some people are, obviously. I've been astonished at the speed and the the depth at which the boomers have just latched onto this technology. I really thought they're not going to go for that. They're not going to, because I saw this divide kind of in the mid noughts where people who I thought were more Gen X, everybody be on their Blackberries in DC, but then I wasn't, or the iPod, you know what I mean? And I just kind of saw people who were, but it was strange. It was the folks who were older were latching, and the people who were younger were latching. And our generation was just sort of like, I don't know about this, So, so I think I treasure that, that we have that experience of, when I worked in music, I had to go and deliver the posters. I had to go talk to the people. I had to sell the thing. You really should come. And people had to show up and interact and say, how did you like it? What did you not like? And had to do that, and so, and then the research part of it, I miss that. I miss being able to pull the cards out and, type up and arrange my index cards. And I
remember that. And I remember when cut and paste wasn't just a app feature. It was, I would do that. I mean, I was a journalist in college and after, and I would type on a manual typewriter, later an electric typewriter, and I would literally cut and tape or paste paragraphs that I was rearranging. And it worked. If you asked me to do it today, I'd feel like you were asking me to, I don't know, harvest my own food or something as a means of subsistence survival. But it did work. It did work.
Well, and I think it made us resourceful, though, right? You need to track someone down. You need to figure out what's really going on, and you have the capacity to do it. I think people now feel like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, then find out. Go drive over there.
Find the fuck out. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times people make comments to me where they correct me on something and they're wrong, and it falls to me to be like, no, that's not correct. And there's this thing called Google, and you could find out the weather in Cincinnati right now, but they won't do it. And the laziness is extraordinary.
Because they actually, unlike us, they have the Library of Alexandria, as I say, in a kind of rude way. You have it next to your balls.
So true, right? I like that.
What are you doing?
Right.
And this poster behind me, it's from an exhibit in, I think it was 1996, Destroyed.
I can't see it because the Gen Wasteland logo.
I can remove it. There you go.
I want to see this poster.
But there's the story behind it is I saw a news article, a little blurb about an art exhibit in the back of an architecture magazine, Blueprint magazine.
Yeah.
And it said, and I was working in music, and I was like, oh my God, I would love to go to that. Well, it's over. I'm like, damn it, maybe I could buy a poster.
Right,
so
right.
Again, it was a lot of money to call, pick up the phone, call and say, do you sell posters? And they said, we didn't sell any posters. And I was like, oh, and they said, but you know what? We have one sitting here. You want us to send it to you?
That's amazing.
A poster for free.
Humanity.
Just because I had the will, right?
Yeah.
That we learned from a young age, whether it was latchkey or the apocalypse, Reagan, whatever it was, we learned you can do this. You can do it.
Absolutely. It's all very striking. I never really thought, I don't think back frequently on the passage of time where the names that we have for things like the Library of Alexandria, like cut and paste, actually represented physical, three-dimensional, tactile things. And I mean, again, there's still a hunger for it, but it's very interesting to think back to those times. It's almost fearsome to think of not having all these electronic goodies, but I don't remember being unhappy and thinking, oh my God, if I have to cut and paste another paragraph, it was just very natural.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very true. Oh, it looks like we got Mr. Ray.
No. I'm Jacob. I'm Ms.
Hi, man. How are you?
Are you doing the phones, man?
Yes, I'm doing the phones today.
All right, cool. Good to see you. Yeah, if anybody in the audience wants to call in a question, please, where's the number? I got the banner here. If you have a question for Mitch, please
Oh, I love
call
it. You have a
in.
crawl at the bottom of the screen.
We're going to the 90s, and Mr.
Right. We should put news
Jacob
on there.
Taylor will take care of it. Appreciate you
How
being
much
here.
do you love that? I love
Absolutely.
that.
Great. I want the S&P 500 numbers on there. I want all that stuff. I remember there was maybe it's still on. It may very well still be on, but there was a business channel, Bloomberg News, and they had a crawl where there would be constant news, weather, stock prices. They figured out that our generation is needful of it multitasks and it multi-watches and it multi-views, and so it's just bringing back that memory too.
Back in the day, awesome. Well, I guess my next question would be about your wheelhouse. Well, you are a Gen X, so that should be your wheelhouse. But being wheelhouse in occultism, obviously today, Mitch, tarot, astrology, I Ching is more popular than ever. Manifestation more popular than ever. Jung is more popular. Everybody talks about shadow work and archetypes and synchronicities. It's I don't know if you want to say a golden age, maybe a fool's golden age, but these things that you've written for years, have talked about, how would you compare it to, let's say, the 90s occultism? What was occultism to you in the 90s and compared to now? Was it challenging? Was it exciting?
All these things were available, of course, but in manual form. Although, of course, astrology at that time, ephemerae were digitized at that time. But I recollect learning the I Ching using not yarrow stalks like a real traditionalist, but using coins. I learned the basics of soup to nuts Western astrology in a little guide published by Llewellyn. I remember I sat down on an expansive lawn outside the New York Public Library one summer morning, and I said, I am not getting up from this spot until I could cast and read horoscopes. And 8 hours later I could. And tarot, of course, as cards. I have been using. There's I think it's I Ching .net. There's a digital I Ching program that I've been using, and quite frankly, the results have been very satisfactory. And I tend to be, well, I don't know how to put it. I mean, some people would say that the old way is the traditional way, but for me, the traditional way is the acknowledgement of randomness and the question of whether randomness represents a kind of multi-dimensional snapshot of the whole, which is pretty much what Carl Jung and some of his students believed as they were working with I Ching. I certainly believe that is true apropos of tarot, and sometimes I challenge myself on that and say, okay, if I'm so sure about that, then why not use a magic 8-ball? And I think to myself, well, I mean, I'm not going to run away from this. This concept of randomness is very interesting to me. We find it within chaos magic. Terence McKenna and Ram Dass were having a discussion at one time, and this is in the book. And one of them said, I think it was, I don't know, maybe Terence said something to the effect of, in life you just let the chips fall where they may. And Ram Dass said, in other words, in perfect harmony. And he said, right, in perfect harmony. There was something Taoist about it. So I don't feel guilty or embarrassed or anything, not remotely, using an I Ching program online. I use it quite a bit. I also believe that there's a bibliomancy dimension to I Ching and to tarot, where, again, it's that same randomness. And there's a delightful question at stake there as to whether it means anything, and of course it means something, and what it means and why it means something is the subject of a full chapter in the book. I think I call it The Logic of Tarot, and that logic is transferable to digital means. So I used to not care very much about the questions of tech and occultism, but now I really do, not only because of what we're talking about, but because and we were discussing this, Miguel, previously on Eon Byte, the revolution that's about to reach us, the public, in quantum computing is going to render the multiverse a logical necessity. And again, that's why I feel there's such a moment of portent in our world right now, because these debates are they're moving totally out of the skeptic versus believer paradigm, which is dead.
Right.
And the skeptics have lost. They've lost intellectually. They've won culturally. But that's about to change too, because AI and quantum computing is going to render so many changes in our world. I think it's difficult for us to conceive of at this moment. And the question of a multiverse is intrinsic to the effectiveness of quantum computing.
Well said. And yes, I'm having great success doing the I Ching and using AI, deep seek to go back and forth. And I'm having amazing results, and it's starting to predict some very eerie things. I'm going back and like, oh my God, it knew this was going to happen 2 weeks ago, and I missed it. I was retro cut, but it's pretty freaky.
It's really freaky.
To freak me out.
and Jung and translator John Blofeld, who translated the I Ching in 1968, they both voiced the perception as maybe a little different from what you were saying, but related, that the I Ching has a kind of personality. And if you ask the same question twice, it's perfectly capable of sort of making you the butt of a joke, we'll say. And I've had the most uncanny experiences. Nothing an actuarial table could ever account for. Nothing that I love that term. What is it? There's a particular one of the cognitive biases that makes a tarot seem real. It's not survivor bias, which I'm always accused of. I'm trying to work my way through all the different cognitive biases. I'm very committed to expressing every possible cognitive bias. But these things they're not containable by those flimsy jars that skeptics cling to explain reality to themselves. Reality is much stranger.
Yeah. From a Jungian point, you could say, well, you're projecting. Well, duh. That's the whole point of reality. We are God projecting upon the screen. So it's interactive, manageable, brittle. It's at our hands. What do you think, Sherilyn?
I'm trying to remember which book it's in. I think it's Campbell's Flight of the Wild Gander, but he says something like, Kant dismantled the philosophical mansions of Cartesian philosophy 100 years ago, but nobody seems to have figured that out, that it's all gone. There's nothing here anymore.
Right.
It's all bullshit. Right. And then, we're talking about meaning, and people say, what's the meaning of life? And he said, there's no meaning. Decide. Go ahead, figure it out. We're here to create that meaning. And the third thing that came to mind was, the experiment, one of the experiments, but the dialogue that Jung had with physicist Wolfgang Pauli, that they ended up calling what happened to things, to physical matter around him, the Pauli effect, and forbade him to work on the Manhattan Project because all the instruments would go crazy. There was clearly this instantiation of the unseen into the scene, that Jung took very seriously. And so Jung's sort of star pupil was, Marie-Louise von Franz, sort of his heir apparent. And her heir apparent is a man named Theo Abt. If you all aren't familiar with his work, I highly encourage you to check it out. But he worked side by side with von Franz for decades and actually found an alchemical text that was one text that she was missing. She had done this huge translation and interpretation, and she was missing this one piece. And he found it in this archive in Turkey and really completed her work. So he was sort of the heir to her. He's founded his own training institute in Zurich that looks at Jung and von Franz. I'm saying all this to say that one of the main points that they look at is specifically the autonomous psyche and the psychoid, is how the unseen is coming into the scene. It's not, this isn't a theory. This happens. It happens to us every day, so.
For sure, and Wilson. And when did you start getting
I'm reminded
into
of something that the late John Mack said.
Go ahead.
John Mack, who we lost far too early, said this in a conversation with Terence McKenna. And he said, within Western culture, at least within academia, mainstream journalism, sort of the mainstream expressions of Western culture, you can abide talk about different freaky things, coming out of special relativity, coming out of quantum mechanics. You can abide spirituality as long as it's put into a nice safe box like a department of theology. And there are ways that we digest this, but the one unforgivable sin in the Western cultural mindset is demonstrating that any of this stuff actually makes its impact felt in the tactile world known to us. And you cannot say that. So you cannot talk about ESP. You cannot talk about chaos magic relating to chaos theory. You cannot talk about retrocausality. You cannot talk about any kind of anomalous cognition. Then you're a nut. I suspect that the rising generation is not going to have that problem, or at least nowhere to the degree that we've felt it in the past generation. And I wouldn't have said that 5 years ago. No way. I would have said, well, the normies have won culturally. We've won intellectually, but they've got all the pillars of mainline society, and that is changing before our eyes. Oh, I think I lost you, my man.
Yes. Okay.
Houston,
sorry.
We've got a problem.
Yeah, Houston, we have a problem. I am back.
Is that a Gen X? That Gen X? Jacob is like, what? Houston?
Yeah. I'm just listening to all of this. It's like, pretty cool.
What are you talking about? It's like just the grandparents going on again. Get some more cough syrup.
No. My dad was too tired. He didn't know he was going to be tired today, so that's why he didn't hop on.
Okay.
He got me to do it.
It was nice to meet you, and awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I don't know if anybody's calling, but remember.
No, not yet. I haven't got any calls yet.
Yeah, please call 434-532-9370 as we get towards the end. Sherilyn, when did you become a heretic or a witch? Were you always into this stuff? I mean, I was a late bloomer. I was sort of a ecumenical Catholic until my 40s. So
yeah, I think from a really young age, just because my dreams were my intuition was telling me something completely different from what I was seeing and what I was being taught, and one of the professor I had said, and I don't know if maybe Jung actually said this, but that you can't Christianize the psyche. And any religion, you can't convert the psyche. The psyche and your dreams are going to say what they need to say, and whatever metaphor they want to use, and whatever images they want to portray. And for there to be such a disconnect between, all this information coming in and what I'm spontaneously experiencing there was always a very huge divide there. But I know when I got into music and I started working in music, the sort of trend at the time was chuck everything, right? Chuck all spirituality. And not that lots of people weren't into, heterodox or occult things. They clearly were. But there was this sort of, screw the man, chuck it all. Let's just do Nietzsche and Sartre and, let's just go that route. And I tried that for about 6 weeks. And I thought, ooh, that's not enough. Not that Nietzsche doesn't, or those people don't have things to offer. They do very much so. But it's really, there's so much. We're inherently spiritual beings. That's what we are. And to me, there had to be more. I don't just chuck this and just, now I'm just a meat sack. So I think that, probably a few years after I got into music, I started seeing, and it really, and I knew Jung from a young age. You know what it was? And I've told this story before. It was the police synchronicity. That's exactly what it was. Because I got the little tape. I bought it in New York City in 1982. My family took me on a trip there in Times Square back when they had the X-rated things up, They're like, look away, look away. You know?
Poor girl.
Right.
What is this place?
Right.
But I remember I took that home, and I back when they had the liner notes, and I listened to it, and I looked up every single word. I didn't know what it meant, and I thought, oh, that's what's going on. You know, I had some inkling that there was something going on, you know, and it was explanatory to me in a way that made sense, and that stayed with me. So that's why I studied Jung, and that was just always sort of a through line for me of making things okay that I was experiencing that were outside the orthodoxy. Nobody could ever tell me this is evil, this is wrong. I'd be like, well, okay, I guess. You know, I don't know what to say, because it's, for me, it's true, you know. So, and I, you know, I've been doing a series of public talks here at UM, bringing in Jung and Campbell into these sort of mythic stories, and really helping people that are coming from a very, you know, what we call normal or normalized, or, you know, I don't want to use any words that could be insulting, but a standard point of view. Most people in this country are still raised Christian, you know, it's the way it is. And there's a bridge there, right? That doesn't have to be, you need to give up that and it's wrong. You know, it's like, no, there are ways, you know, what is going on with you internally is okay. And there's a bridge that to make, you know, wherever you are, make sense for you. You know, as Jung said, when people do their inner work, they end up, instead of them being in the church is in them, right? You can find it where you are. So it's been an interesting exercise for me to try to build that language to people who might push it away if you lead with, you know, magic with a K. You might not want to lead with that, you know, but just help them to realize that there's a variety of points of view there that are valid. And it's going to depend on their own internal experience. So that's been a challenge and a real blessing for me, you know, because if one thing that I'm really tired of, and I think this ties back into the Gen X thing, is that I remember that we were allowed to disagree. I remember that it was okay for lots of people to get in there and kind of just disagree, and everybody was still a human being, and people weren't canceled and demonized and cast out. And I am so confused by that, you know, at people not being allowed to have different opinions. And I loved that about our generation. Like, what happened to people being able to just duke it out, you know, and then be okay with each other?
And we were a content of the character generation. That's what we believed.
Yeah, we did believe that. And, you know, that today is at best considered sentimental tripe. At best, you know.
At best.
I've been told that, you know, the term complexity is a hate word. I can't invoke complexity anymore. So, trying to think of synonyms. I haven't found any. It's interesting. We're not, as a human community, sufficiently mature, sufficiently developed to handle the 24-hour open mic night of social media, and I believe it's going to destroy us. I really feel that if we don't curb the hatred, the name calling, the sarcasm, the body shaming, the rhetorical questions, the canceling, the doxing, etc., over social, we're not going to make it. And it's so, I hate to put it in these terms, because we're creatures of habit, we're creatures of addiction, but it's so simple, it's so easy, you know, and it can't be blamed. I'm tired of hearing it blamed on Zuck or on Elon. It's my fault. You know, I'm participating in these things, and often people come to me, and in so many words they say they have problems with self-image, and what can I do? And my suggestion is spend 1 hour desisting from trash talk on social, and see if you don't stand taller. Is your existence worth 1 hour? See if you don't stand taller. You will. Because we do sublimate the shame of that, and we hide it by going back to the bottle and having another drink, or back to the needle, or whatever. And it's a terrible cycle. And people, look, I can say only from personal experience, it can be broken. You know, I fail and I fall down and I mess up, but I don't generally participate in trash talk on social. And at first, for a little while there, I did, because I just thought it was the lingua franca, you know, and that's what we do. That's how we communicate over social media. and it's not necessary, and the individual will stand taller for having not done it, and will not be responsible reciprocally or karmically or however you want to look at it for inducing anger and hatred in another, which just gets passed on. I am convinced that one of the imperatives of the rising generation, and quantum this and retro that, will not make a difference for us if we don't get on top of curbing the hate and the trash on social.
Well said
And
indeed.
nobody's
Very,
there to do it for us.
yeah, very inspiring words, and I agree. Awesome. Well, we are getting at the end. Yeah, I should mention too, I do remember Synchronicity, Jung, Sherilyn, and the Police album, but never made any sense. Even when I go back, I'm like, is Sting really talking about synchronicity? I don't know. I have my image, and I know Sting was very much into the tarot and other sort of alternative stuff. So he was there, but for me was later on reading Alan Moore's The Watchman, where he quotes Jung, that amazing quote, and me be like, I got to find out more about this dude. So
yeah,
to each.
I want to say, Mitch, about your book. I really like I love how you describe this thing as causative ritual, and you're, I mean, the title is summing it up. This is practical, and that we're doing this all the time. It's part of the core of our being. And I remembered a quote from the Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, and he's talking about black. He's like, you're already doing it, and that ties into you're talking about the trash talk. When you speak badly, when you speak hatefully, you are doing black magic. That is what you are doing, and that people, if they could see that bridge of like, we already are doing this every day with the images that we hold, with the words that we speak. And so to me that, from what I've read of your book and heard you say about it, that it is really this another type of bridging language of, to necessarily demystify it, stigmatize it in a way, to say, you're already doing it. It's happening right now. Yes. And it's part of the core. And I think back to the Gen X thing is that, to quote something pretty pedestrian or plebeian, Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan till they get hit in the mouth, right?
Yeah, perfectly put. I
can remember a time that if I talked badly about somebody, and I knew I would see them at some point, we were going to see each other at the concert. We were going to see, if you did this with this guy's girlfriend or that guy's boyfriend, there was going to be a consequence at some point. People took it seriously. Mm-hmm. And in some way, we dealt with more of the bullying and more of the violence, but it tempered us in a way that made us think before we would do that, because there were consequences.
You're absolutely correct. And I'm struck, as I'm sure many of you are and many of the viewers are, that when you meet the social media boogeyman, he almost invariably turns out to be a shy, retiring person for whom you might even feel sorry, and I have all these fantasies of going to the boogeyman's house with an aluminum baseball bat and teaching him what pain is. But then he'd open the door and I would feel humanity for him, because the people doing this over social, they're desperate small people. They're bad, and I don't like them and I don't forgive them, but they're desperate small people. And we learned that, back in the pre-digital days. You kind of had to put your money where your mouth is. And, sometimes I stuck my mouth in the wrong place, and I got reminded a little bit of what Mike said. And that's necessary. It's part of growing up, And I don't know if that's available to people when anonymity and the disinhibition of digital media are the name of the game. I suppose that's why kids getting bullied so brutally over digital media seem to be suffering at the hands of other kids who know no empathy. Perhaps they don't know empathy. They do not know empathy, because social media does not teach empathy.
Well said. Yes. Awesome. Well, we better wrap it up here. Really great discussion as always, with awesome guests, and friends too. So it's great we can still do that digitally or at a conference and other places. So life is good, and good to see people on the chat. Again, subscribe to this channel, to the iTunes, to the Spotify, because this is separate from Aeon Byte, and but it is growing well along with the sales of the Occult Elvis. So Not too bad. Well, first, yeah, Jacob, thanks for joining us. Sorry we didn't get any calls. Maybe the next time it will happen. Sometimes people are not ready to call in. I think our last show we got a couple, but so it is. But yeah, thanks, Jacob. And yeah, Sherilyn, as always, thanks for keeping me company. You rock.
Thanks for having me. It's just an honor. Always love hearing what you have to say, Mitch. Really adds a lot to the conversation and the surround.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Love being here with y'all. And I'm excited, Miguel, for the launch of this new podcast. I think you're the solution, so we need more of your stuff out there.
It's a wasteland. It's a wasteland, like the Who sang. So we do the best we can. No, Mitch, thanks as always for coming on. Love talking to you in any format, any medium, and so forth. And for the audience, his new book is Practical Magick. Check it out because you're going to get a lot of good exercises and ideas to really improve your life. Physical, digital, metaphysical, everywhere. So check out Practical Magick. Good stuff. But for everybody else, yeah, please, enjoy the rest of your day. And we will have a new episode sooner rather than later. I don't have any sort of canned goodbye expression. I guess Gen X would be F you, bye, leave me alone. I don't know what to say.
Good night and good news. That was Ted Baxter's expression. That's a good I bequeath that to you.
What about Johnny Fever and WKRP Cincinnati? Did he have any good send off? He was like my hero. I want to be like him with the glasses that just bloated and just that old style DJ.
That could happen, Miguel. You know, we got to get you drug addicted, and you know,
start calling us all babies. Call all your guests babies. Hey, babies. Hey, my babies. My babies.
Honey. Yeah. All right, everybody. Take care, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.